All right, if you're a Spring developer, you're using dependency injection every single day. But are you sure you're using the right kind? Today, we're going to break down the two heavyweights in the Spring world, constructor versus setter injection.
So here's how we'll tackle this. We'll start with why dependencies can be such a problem in the first place. Then we'll see how Spring's inversion of control saves the day. We'll look at the two main ways to inject dependencies, put them head-to-head, and wrap up with some clear advice so you know exactly which one to choose.
Okay, first things first, we have to set the stage here. Before we can appreciate the solution, we really need to understand the problem it was designed to solve. And that problem is tightly coupled code.
So, does this sound familiar? You make one tiny change in one part of your application, and suddenly, everything breaks in places you didn't even touch. It's frustrating, right? Why does our code get so tangled up like this?
Well, the culprit has a name: tightly coupled code. This is what happens when your objects are so intertwined that they can't exist without each other. You know, imagine a report service that, inside its own code, creates a new database connection. That service is now stuck with that specific connection forever. It makes your whole system rigid, and it's an absolute nightmare to test and maintain.
So, how do we get out of this mess? Well, that brings us to the solution, what we call inversion of control. This is where we basically just let the Spring framework take the wheel for us.
The first piece of this puzzle is dependency injection, or DI. Now, instead of an object building its own dependencies, DI completely flips that around. The dependencies are just handed to the object. They're injected from the outside. And just like that, you break those tight bonds. Your objects become way more modular and so much easier to test. And this is all part of a bigger idea called inversion of control, or IOC. You can think of it as the "don't call us, we'll call you" principle of software. You're no longer in charge of creating all your objects and connecting them. You hand that control over to the Spring container. You just say what you need, and the framework handles the whole life cycle. It's a game changer.
Okay, so we've got it. Spring is going to handle injecting our dependencies. But how? How does it actually deliver them? This gets us to the real heart of our explainer today. The two main ways Spring gets this done.
Yep, when it comes to dependency injection in Spring, you've basically got two main paths you can go down.
First up, we have constructor-based injection. This is pretty straightforward. The dependencies are just passed in as arguments to the class's constructor when the object is first created. This means the object is born complete with everything it needs to do its job right from moment one.
And the second method is setter-based injection. Now, this one is a two-step process. First, Spring creates the object with an empty constructor. Then, after it exists, Spring calls public setter methods, like a setReportService method, to inject the dependencies one by one.
And now, for the main event. Let's put these two approaches in the ring and see how they stack up, head to head. We'll look at where each one really shines and where they kind of fall short.
This table really nails the key differences. Let's walk through it. First, dependency type. This is the big one. Constructor injection is for mandatory dependencies, the stuff your object absolutely cannot live without. Setter injection, on the other hand, is for things that are optional. Next, immutability. With constructor injection, you can use final fields, which means you can create truly immutable, thread-safe objects. You just can't do that with setters. That leads right into state guarantee. A constructor-injected object is always valid and fully initialized. With setters, there's a small window where the object exists, but its dependencies aren't set yet. And finally, the tricky one, circular dependencies. This is when bean A needs bean B and bean B needs bean A. Constructor injection will see this and throw an error right away. Setter injection can sometimes resolve this, but honestly, it's often a sign of a design smell anyway.
You know, it really all boils down to this one simple guideline, straight from the Spring team themselves. If you only remember one thing from this entire explainer, let it be this. Use constructor injection for things you need, and use setter injection for things that are just nice to have.
Okay, with that showdown in mind, let's get down to brass tacks. In our final section, we'll turn all this theory into some practical advice you can start using in your code, like right now.
So let's make this super simple. You should reach for constructor injection when your dependencies are mandatory, when you want to guarantee your object is always in a valid state, and when you want to create immutable objects. And you should go with setter injection when a dependency is optional, when you might need to reconfigure it later, or in that rare case where you have to resolve a circular dependency.
At the end of the day, it's not about one being better than the other. It's about a strategic choice. Constructor injection gives you safety and guarantees for the things you can't live without. Setter injection gives you flexibility for the things that are optional.
And that brings us to the final question you should ask yourself when you look at your own code. Is your dependency strategy building a rock-solid, predictable foundation, or is it building a house of cards that could tumble down with the next change? The choice and the power is in your hands.